Hi and welcome to Homo Ludens, the channel on history and board games. I'm here with Joe Clyne.
Let's do it.
A regular guest, I would say. It's only the
At
second.
This point.
Yeah. It's only the second time that you're here physically, but you've done quite a few playthroughs online and all this. You're more of the streamer generation anyway, so that makes more sense. And we're here to talk about SpielWorxx, I think, latest game, Pilgrim, that was released in late 2022, designed by Nick Case. So, Pilgrim, maybe we should start this video by saying that this is not exactly going to be a review. It's more us sharing, I don't know, how would you call it?
Let's say like something like overall thoughts or general thoughts or, thoughts after playing a couple of times.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, thoughts after playing a couple of times.
But we're definitely not good at the game.
Yeah, we're really bad. Actually, you're particularly bad, I would say. So that's a really good point. I did cheat. I think I have 6 extra points that we should probably remove from. From my score in the list.
It's difficult not to cheat.
Yeah, by accident.
Yeah.
But that's maybe something that we'll talk about. The thing I think is going to be hard for me to make an actual review of Pilgrim is that compared to the other games that we're playing on the channel, it's a lot less of a historical game and it's a lot more of a like a pure Euro game with an historical theme. And it's not really my domain of competence, I would say. I'm not sure how to say it. Yeah. But so that's the thing, is that so it's going to be more like sharing thoughts, discussing with Joe, talking about it, and maybe just for context. So this game is set in 14th century England, and each of the players are gonna, I would say, play like a monastery, or do you think it's a monk order? Maybe it's more of a monk order.
Yeah, I think so. I think like maybe like a collective of religious people, and you're competing to kind of maybe make your sect better than the other people's. I think it
would be fair to say that you're playing an abbot or something like this, and then you have like a sort of like order or division of an order of monks.
Yeah.
And what you're going to try to do is build networks, like holy networks in a way, or commercial ones that will link to the main city that you're working around, up to a pilgrimage site, but crossing through shrines. So you have you're really creating this very medieval era path, like Chemin de Saint-Jacques de Compostelle, the thing that you would do like really for pilgrims.
Yeah, and I think that's really, they hit hard on that, because the more shrines on your route, the more points it gets.
Yeah.
So you're making the holiest route, and it doesn't matter what it takes to make that route, you're making it.
Yeah. And the longer the route, the more support you get from the local cardinal and everything. So it makes a lot of sense. But then there is different paths to victory. So it's not only about faith and religion. It's also about commerce, but also building an infrastructure, having a good organization, having a lot of buildings that gonna unlock different kinds of capabilities, which is actually quite interesting. And it's interesting because a lot of people first describe this game as an historical 18xx, and I think it's something that we need to get right out of the way. If you're an 18xx fan, this game is not particularly for you. It might be for you, but not because you're an 18xx fan.
Yes, it's not an economic game.
It is not really an economic game. Not in the sense that an 18xx game is an economic game. No. Like you're not going to share.
The market is not closed.
Like you don't have and you don't really clearly have a market in any way. No. In that sense, it is historical. Like it's not really a capitalistic market.
No.
You're building infrastructure for.
It's free resources.
Yeah, exactly, for different reasons. Yeah, wheat, stone, and actual coins.
Yep.
But you get coins through. Not through commercial means. You're actually selling alms and everything.
There's no difference between the use for money and wheat. They are both just a resource.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's actually, in that sense, it's really interesting. So the economy that is depicted in Pilgrim is proto-capitalistic.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it is quite historical and interesting. The different things that you do and the way you generate resources is also historical.
Yeah, the emphasis on money being a part of the church is definitely there.
Yeah.
It's throughout, on the back of the box it mentions it, in the rulebook it mentions it, the actions it mentions it, food, wheat, infrastructure, stone, but also money are really, really important. And you need all three to be able to do anything in the game, really.
Yeah. And anyway, not an 18xx game. You do have this tile laying system because you're building networks of roads and you're slightly competing with others to build those networks on roads, but it's not super aggressive and you don't have common vested interest in a company, so all this doesn't exist. So it's clearly not that. No. But still an interesting game in that regard, but I wouldn't say that's the most interesting part of Pilgrim.
Maybe we should say, how do you go about your actions? How do you play?
Yeah, I think that's one of the key features. Maybe you want to talk about this because for me that was new, and I think that even but I'm not a big Eurogamer player. You play more Euro games than I do, a lot
definitely.
more. And I was really surprised by the way it works, the system. But maybe you want to talk a bit about it.
Yeah, so you basically have the map that you'll see in the middle, and around the map is these 8 actions in the shape of kind of shields or arrows. And on your turn, you can choose either the middle of the city where you have your meeples, your acolytes, or one of the locations around the board.
Yeah.
You pick them all up, and then like a rondelle, you'll drop them off in a clockwise location.
Mancala.
Yeah, the Mancala, sorry, you'll drop them off, and then after you've done that, you can choose any location where you have acolytes now and do one of those actions. The thing that makes it clever is if you have a majority on those locations, you're going to get to be able to do a larger action, or it won't cost you any resources, it will actually be cheaper. And so the difficulty comes in knowing when the opponents are going to be moving their acolytes and therefore giving you a majority so that you can eke out just a little bit more efficiency in those 8 actions.
Yeah. And it creates really this really interesting tempo where you're really thinking sometimes a couple of rounds ahead around, well, this round is not going to be perfect. I'm maybe going to do a smaller action, but at least I'm not going to pay.
Yeah.
But I'm going to place my acolyte in a position where in the next round, I'm going to be able to have a stronger position in that specific area to do my specific duty. And I think this is actually an interesting aspect of the game, this positioning and almost area majority, but in a very mobile way. And it talks about, on the back of the box and on the short historical notes, about social mobility. And I guess that's the part of it, like it's a game that is very mobile for worker placement, which I think is really interesting and a really interesting feature of the game.
I mean, it's that classic Euro, you can get wheat now, or, you need wheat now.
Yeah.
But if you wait one more turn, you'll get an extra wheat. Which one do you do?
Yeah, and it's a trade-off. Yeah.
And but it's not. But it's all to do with whether you can tell what your opponents are going to do.
Yeah.
And that interactivity is kind of at the forefront of, how you play.
Yeah.
And another thing that I think is worth noting and really important, on the map there's these 4 rivers, and there's a north, a south, east and west. But when you moved your workers initially from the city, they have to go either north or south. And that means that the actions that are immediately available are the most common actions, because everybody will always go there. Whereas the ones that are further around each side in the northwest and the southeast of the board are much, much harder to get to. And in the setup, that's variable. So that means sometimes those actions will be, the build roads actions will be really hard to get to, and it will be much, much harder to build roads. Whereas in another game, maybe it's the gain resources actions, and then in that, it's going to be much easier to build roads, but actually get resources is going to be much, much harder. And
the situation of each game is going to be widely different.
Yes.
You're going to have different buildings, and the buildings are going to trigger different kinds of powers. They're going to be activated at different moments. And those tiles, as you say, the geography, you could say, the social geography of the game is going to be very variable, and it's going to shape a lot what players are going to be able to do. And this is really interesting. There are some things that are going to be static, like, for example, you're going to have 2 places where you can build trade routes for 3, for example, then 2 where you can build for 4, and this is going to be always the same, but the way you're going to get to that is actually quite different from game to game, which is, I guess, like if you are going to play this game over and over, and I guess if you really want to be good at it and really get into it, you need to play it over and over, and I think it's really nice to have this thing where you're going to always have that variability of the different actions that are going to be available.
I think opposed to potentially other Euro games, where the setup is different every time. It makes it different.
Yeah, here it really matters.
It really does matter. The game is fundamentally different, but the same for everyone. Everyone has the same problem. It's not, oh, you drew that card, so you have this special ability. It's different every time. You can't go in, basically, is what we're saying, and play the same strategy as last time and still win, because you're going to have to adapt. It's really difficult.
Yeah, and the information is completely open. So in that way, it feels a bit like, we were talking about the Great Zimbabwe. Like, this is the setup at the beginning. Everyone knows what's going to come up.
Yeah.
So you have this input randomness at the beginning of the game, and you have to figure out within that random input what is the best output that you can generate.
I think if you played this against someone who was really good, we were talking, if Nick Case plays this, he probably plays this to a level that we will never play. I mean,
and you can see it in the game. There are some rules that are made to actually constrain players that are probably really good, and we never reach those limits. And we're well, we're probably really bad. Like you were talking about the slots, the limited slots.
You're only allowed to have 6 buildings or bonuses in the game, a maximum. And sometimes you'll want more, but you're not allowed to do that. Well, at the end of the game we most recently played, Fred had filled up 2 of the 6.
Yes.
I'd filled up 3. And the other person we played with had filled up 4. So no one ever encountered that problem.
Yeah. It's like, but it's here for that. It's like you need to have that hard decision making about, am I building that other building, but I need to have the spot free for the cardinal bonus. And I'm like, well, that's never a problem for me because I'm too dumb. It's like I'm too stupid to get to that level. So that's actually quite interesting. And that's the thing. Like I think it's a game that has quite a lot of depth. It feels like
we already mentioned that the main way you're going to get victory points in the game is through building these pilgrimage routes, and the game makes it pretty obvious that if you don't, it expects most players to build probably 2 of these of different length. The game we just played, I didn't even do 1, and as a result, I lost pretty heavily. So
I think not doing at least 1 is a big problem. But so maybe let's talk a bit more like in details about the stuff that we like and we didn't like. Maybe start with the negative. So what didn't you like about Pilgrim?
I think the rule book at times is a little bit edge case. Like it's not clear exactly
what it means.
Some of the terms are needlessly specific, and what I mean by this is there's the 8 action tiles that we mentioned around the board. Some give you the option of doing one thing or another thing. So maybe, for example, the clerical, it's called a duty tile. The cleric lets you either do kind of the pray action or the money action, let's say. Well,
and they both have a specific name?
They have a specific name.
But you cannot find them easily.
Yes, it's not easy to tell. And I think at times that makes knowing what's right and what's wrong really difficult. And that leads on to the player aids, I think, quite well. Because the player aids are a good size, I think. They're like a little book.
At the same time, they're great.
Yep.
But
the graphic design on them is not the greatest. There's poor resolution, fuzzy bits,
Yeah, it doesn't look professional.
No, it doesn't. It looks a little bit amateur. I think the font doesn't help. It's probably easier to read than kind of a font like on the front of the box. But in addition, there's stuff that's in the rule book that's left off the player aids.
And that is critical.
That is really important because there's times where you don't want to be opening the rule book every single time. How do I do this action? I mean, I definitely know.
I think it's the duty level thing, like specifically, how does the duty level specifically impact each duty?
And the way that works is that we mentioned area majority, and basically if you're on this tile and you choose to activate it, if you have the majority of acolytes, you have more than other people, you're going to get what's called a duty value of 2. Whereas if you have the same as everybody else, you have a duty value of 1, and if you have the least, you're going to have the duty value of 1 and have to pay an extra resource. It wasn't obvious through the player aid how duty level affected your ability to do that action. So let's say, for example, you're going to pray and you're going to move up on the piety track. You're going to gain some holiness. If you have a duty level of 1, you can move up 1. If you have a duty level of 2, you can move up 2. That's obvious. But on some other actions like taxation,
oh god, taxation.
We'd often play as according to the player aid, only then 30 minutes into the game to read the rulebook, and something that's in the rulebook has been left off the player aid for no reason. So that's really difficult because you're not going to look at the rulebook for every single rule in there.
And you want a game to flow along, So
it feels almost. It reminds me a little bit of kind of Food Chain Magnate, where you have the player aids, where you look like you're like, oh, what does this action do? You're reading this little menu, and you're like, okay, if I do that, I can do that. Oh, but then you can't trust the player aid because it's wrong. So well, it's not wrong, it just doesn't elaborate
Yeah, it's
enough.
incomplete.
Yeah. So then you check the rule book and it's like, oh, what's in the player aid is right. The execution of the player aid is really, it's frustrating because it could have been perfect.
Yeah.
You know, pretty much how to play the whole game could have been in the player aid. And other than that, I think what to do at the end of a round in the player aid is good.
Yeah.
How to score points in the player aid is good.
A lot of the content in there is really good. It's just that it misses the mark in some critical ways that makes it a bit painful.
And in this game, there's 8 different locations to go.
Yeah.
Probably something like 15 different total actions. So it's critical. You can't remember 15 actions without playing multiple times. So yeah, the player aid is a shame. But once you know the rules, the game is much better.
Yeah.
For it.
And yeah, I think the flow gets really good. The other thing that I didn't necessarily like on my side was I think the rule book was a bit could have been slightly better.
And the setup in the rule book as well.
It's not a bad rule book, but it could be a bit clearer, and I think it goes hand in hand with the player aid that could have been a bit more player friendly. The other thing that for me, and it's a weird complaint from a wargamer because we have games with extremely painful setups, but I do believe that for a game like this, like the setup is a bit tedious.
Yeah.
Like you have quite a lot of things to do for the setup. What are going to be the buildings? In which order they're going to be put? Where do they start? And all that.
I also think the game has an introductory starter setup, and
you should play this one.
It should mention that at the start of the setup instead of you reading the first 16 steps and then saying it in the bottom right corner. You know, if you're playing for the first time, use the setup in the photo.
Yeah.
It should say that straight away because, you know, we already mentioned we're not good at the game. We play with the starter setup when we've played, and that, as we've already explained about the locations, the geographical locations of those action tiles, it matters a lot. But like Fred mentions, if you're not playing the starter setup, there's a lot of extra stuff you have to do.
That can be a bit, that can be a bit of a lot. But it's also it's a double-edged sword in the sense that it's also what makes the game very replayable. Yeah,
if it didn't have that setup, you'd be going, okay, well, it's going to be pretty much the same every single time. And I think one of the things that's really interesting is that the game is played over every kind of 4 quarters. There's these seasons that happen, and after once you get a quarter of the way through the game, you check this scoring, thing, see how everyone's doing, and as part of the variable setup, the difference between the first quarter and the second quarter can be variable.
Yeah.
And we've already mentioned, if you were really good at this game, you're going to be able to take that into account.
Yeah.
That seems like something that would be really, really insane to have to take into account with everything else.
Yeah, and the thing that is also hard to take into account is each building is going to be able to trigger different kinds of powers, and you're going to be able to trigger the buildings that are still on the board, the one that have been built by your opponent, and the one that you built yourself. And thinking about all the combination of all the different things that you can do is actually quite a lot.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't see this as a negative. That's just one of the complexity of the game, but that makes it, for me, quite interesting.
It puts the skill ceiling much higher.
Yeah.
Because in a normal game like this, where there's buildings that can be built, you build the building, and then it does something. And then that's kind of it. Or maybe just for you can activate it.
Yeah.
But like Fred mentioned, you build the building and you can use it. You can also use the ones on the board.
And you would pay the bank.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or you can use your opponents.
And you would pay them.
And that requires you to be aware of
a lot of
much stuff, because in each game there's 12 buildings, I think. And so that's 12 different unique abilities that
and sometimes you can combine
them
in a lot of ways. Yeah.
Whereas in another game, there might be 20 buildings, you build 2, I build 2, and then, okay, maybe I can use my 2 and I can use your 2, that's 4 out of 20. But in this, it's 12 out of 12, you can use all 12 are going to be available to you.
Yeah.
So you have to be switched on. You have to be, you have to be looking ahead.
It's pretty involved, And so we talked about the stuff that we didn't necessarily like about the game. We expanded on some of aspects of gameplay, once again, that I think makes the game really interesting. What would you say were the 2-3 things that you really enjoyed about it?
Well, the action selection.
Yeah, the Mancala.
The Mancala is amazing. It feels really satisfying to pick up from the middle of the city.
Those cute meeples, they're so cute. Yeah.
Those five little fellas in the middle of the city, and then
local lads.
Yeah, they just look local lads who are just trying to make a living, and you just get to plonk them around. And as you do this multiple times, it turns out, you've got majority in a location now. That feels super satisfying, and the way it's connected to the board means that it's all intrinsically linked. That's probably the best the action selection is really, really good. It feels really smart as well.
Yeah.
When you get to the way turn order works is that it doesn't just rotate, like now you're the first player, now I'm the first player. Whoever's the holiest at that
highest
that
piety,
time, they get to actually decide. So sometimes you'll say, oh, actually I want Fred to be the first player because he's going to move his guys off that location.
Because he's going to trigger it, and then you're going to get the majority.
And then I'll have the majority. So by predicting what Fred's going to do, and he knows that I know, it's like a whole thing.
Yeah.
So, that's so good.
It's super interesting.
So good. And then I think the second thing for me is I really like the art.
Yeah.
I think
the art is amazing.
Really good. It's Harold Lesky, I think. Harold Lesky.
Yeah, that's the thing.
He's the front cover's amazing. I think the player boards are really cool.
Yeah.
I think the map, before you start covering it up with all these tiles, has this great topography in there.
Yeah, very nice.
I mean, it is beige.
Yeah, it's not too bad. It's greenish.
Yeah.
More.
And I think
it's very medieval, but an interesting reinterpretation of medieval art.
Yeah, and I really like the little player boards where you have your village with your serfs, your unconverted people, as it were.
Yeah.
Where the acolytes are. The Crow's a big fan.
Yeah.
Where the abbey is beautiful.
Yeah.
The art there is really, really nice.
Yeah, it's very, very nice. So
it feels cozy. It feels 14th century.
Yeah, definitely.
It feels cute. It feels.
I think the theme is really strong in the art.
Yeah.
I would say in the game too, but in the art.
Yeah.
So you said the action selection mechanism and everything that the strategic implication of it. The art. Any other thing that you would say is like a big highlight for you in this game?
That's a good question. I think those are the two.
What do you think about the
standouts.
theme? Yeah.
I like the theme a lot.
Yeah.
In fact, that's what attracted me to the game initially. How many Euro games have we had that are named after European cities?
Yeah.
We're still in Europe here, but
and purely like early capitalistic economic games, stuff like this. This is very different.
Yeah, I think I really like that era. 1300s is really interesting, and the idea of being in charge of a monastery. But the money being such an important thing is tongue in cheek. It's quite cool.
And because you're getting on, so you're actually trading money for being.
I mean, if
pious,
we imagine that this was train themed, and instead you're not building pilgrimage routes, you're building city networks. I mean,
it would be boring.
There's so many games like that.
Yeah.
I can name 10 games off the top of my head. I can name a couple games even by SpielWorxx that are doing that. So. In comparison to everything else, there's no industrial revolution here.
Yeah.
It's a kind of similar, but different. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a really, really inspired theme, and I'd like to see more games that are based on this that are more Euros. There's games like the PAX games that deal with the social mobility and But to abstract it to this level is really, really cool.
Yeah, it's really nice. And for me, it's the same. I really like the theme. I think that's one of the three highlights that I have. And the way it's implemented into the game, the way it shapes the geography. And I don't know, I really like the abstraction of the different social layers, the different kinds of jobs that are going to exist, how you're going to influence different parts of the society. I think this is great. The way it's also going through the art is amazing. I love the art. I think it's really cool. So that's the first thing that I really like. The second thing that I really liked, and it might surprise you, but I think it was really interesting how highly interactive it was between players.
It was, yeah.
But at the same time, not feeling cutthroat.
Yes, it's not mean.
Yeah, it's not a mean game. And I think in that sense, it's very different from Splotter games. Like we mentioned The Great Zimbabwe. The Great Zimbabwe is like it's stabby, stab, stab. Always and this one is actually highly interactive. The Mancala is highly interactive. The different things that you're going to do are highly interactive. You're always thinking about what others players are doing, and you're trying to think about what they are going to do because it's going to have an impact on the kind of actions that you're going to do yourself. So you pay attention to the others. You don't really feel like there is a lot of downtime because you're quite involved.
I think,
but at the same time, it's not mean. And I think this is actually pretty nice for once because I feel like Eurogames are either everyone doing their solo stuff on their side, or highly interactive and very mean. And it's nice to have something that is at the same time interactive but also not disruptive.
I think I would compare the interactivity to Concordia, because to me it's like you already mentioned, on the surface you could play this game and go, oh well, I didn't get to directly impact that person, there's no interaction, but then you think about it and you go, actually there's tons of interaction going here under the hood if you actually start to understand, oh actually Fred did his action one turn later because of what I did. I didn't realize that before. So it feels kind of like that that I would say it's actively interactive rather than like it's not direct and it's not passive, it's actively there. And the interaction really feeds into the game really, really nicely. I mean, like we mentioned, you can pay other people to actually use their buildings, so that always feels nice, although we underutilized it maybe, to get some resources out of nowhere just because someone wanted to use your building, for example. So sometimes you might build a building because you know it's powerful. You're not going to use it, but other people are going to pay you to use it. It's really, really good.
And I think that's also the thing with this game, like you're done with the game and I think halfway you have a cycle of realization of all the different things that you can do while you play. Each time we played was this, like each time you say, oh yeah, now I better understand the psychogeography of the map, how it all interacts together, how this ecosystem is coming together. And this is also something that I really like about the game, is how it has an arc in a way.
Seeing the board build up.
Yes, exactly.
It feels really good. And I just thought of another thing that I really like, which is more mechanical and subtle, but the game takes place over 26 rounds, and you'll always play 26 rounds.
Yeah, and you have 26 actions.
Yes, so you'll have 26 actions, and so there's times where you might take a whole turn getting one coin, and you go, damn
is it worth
that's
it?
126 to the game that I've just done to get one coin.
Yeah, that's 3.5% of my actions to get to get a coin.
I think this is definitely something I did wrong, but we got literally halfway through the game and I hadn't built a single road yet.
Yeah.
And I realized, oh no.
That's going to become a problem.
This is going to be wrong. So I really like that because it adds a little bit of that. It's unforgiving to you, Yeah. But on top of that, I thought of another negative. I can't find the game anywhere.
Yeah, that's another negative, and that's maybe the thing that is a bit mean for us to do this review, is that the game is hard to find.
Very difficult.
Sure. Yeah. But that's maybe something that, if you're interested, maybe reach out to the people at SpielWorxx, reach out to Uli on Twitter and say, Uli, I want to buy this game.
If you want to sell it, reach out to me.
Yeah, he wants to buy it.
And I will buy it off you.
Yeah, and I'm not giving it away. I really like it too much. I think it's a unique team. I think it's a really cool game. I would give it, I would need to play it again, but for me that would be an 8 out of 10 for now.
I'd agree. Yeah. It's one of those ones that you bring out and you say, oh, we're going to have, this is an evening game. I say, like, it says 90 minutes plus. That's accurate.
Yeah, that's accurate.
Closer to 2 hours for us, I think.
Yeah, but I think once you know the game, it's probably 90 minutes.
If we played played it back to back, definitely. Yeah.
But a very unique game. Definitely something that I'm really happy to have played. And I'm exploring more and more Eurogames. I wanted to have more Eurogames on the channel, historical Eurogames and stuff like this, a bit different from wargaming. And this is typically the kind of stuff that I wanted to explore. The theme is still a bit light for me, but it is very interesting.
Yeah, it avoids being overly convoluted in its historical theming. It is still, at the heart of it, a strategy point-getting game.
Yeah.
So, overall, very positive.
Yeah, very positive.
Another great game from SpielWorxx.
Yeah, congrats SpielWorxx. Awesome. Thanks for sending the review copy. We had a lot of fun with it. We're going to play it again. And this was the early thoughts, the half review for Pilgrim by SpielWorxx.
That's the game.
That's the game.
In an arc, in an overview.
Yeah, thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed this, and if you are interested in having this channel exploring more games like this, please let us know in the comments, share, subscribe, and if you want to support the show, I will have added the Ko-fi link in the description, and that will give you access to the awesome, legendary Discord server.
We can discuss many more games like this.
Yes, yeah, we have a section called Beige Beige Beige, which is just for those games.
Just for me, really.
Yeah, just for you, actually. We also have the Crokinole Social Club, which is maybe...
Coming soon.
Yeah, so no, it's not coming soon. The channel exists, but maybe we should do a review of Push It, which is my new favorite game, because I don't have a... Yeah, we could play here.
Yeah, we could do a live...
Yes, a live stream. Yeah, live stream coming soon. So, yeah. But thanks for watching, and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.